Hello, everyone. I am Coach Chris, and I'm going to go through Boston Marathon application for 2024. I did a video similar to this last year in 2023, and so I have an update, and I'm going to give a couple of other numbers and stats. Here's a little bit about me, in case you're wondering. Most of you probably aren't. Here's a link to my website in case you want to sign up for coaching. I love to coach people. I also love the Boston Marathon, which is why I do all of these presentations, and I will talk endlessly about it. So join me. We're going to talk about it. This is what we're going to cover today. I will speak about the application period, the acceptance notification, the registration history. So I just find this fascinating. It doesn't necessarily help with anything that you're trying to do for the race for 2025 or years future. I just think it's interesting. So we're going to talk about that, and then I will discuss the field, and I will explain why that number or that information is important, and then the cut. The cut is one of the most popular things for people to talk about. There will be endless conversations and blogs written and et cetera, et cetera. So of course I have to weigh in, and I will do so. All right. One thing that is interesting about the way this whole process works. Essentially, we are in a waiting period right now. We are waiting for the BAA. The BAA is who runs the Boston Marathon. We're waiting for them to tell us when we can apply for the 2025 race. Now, saying that, it has been consistent for a very long time now, so we have a pretty good idea of when it's going to be, and that is very early or middle of September. That's when it's happened for a very, very, very long time now. And so there's no reason to believe that it will happen any differently, but we do not have official confirmation of that yet. This is a list explaining when this information has been announced. So it always happens after the current year's race. You can see here, pre-COVID, it used to happen in May, and we are already in May now. I do not suspect we're going to have an announcement this month, but it has happened in the past. However, as you can see here, post-COVID, for the last 3 years, the announcement has occurred in June. So I suspect, cannot guarantee, but suspect, this trend will continue, and we will hear from the BAA in June. Now, you will note that last year, the announcement was made very early June 5th, 2023. So it's possible we are only 1 month away from this official announcement of when you can apply for the 2025 Boston Marathon. So the full statement is going to come out on the BAA website. And just as a note, general blanket note, I really think everybody who has questions about the Boston Marathon should go to the BAA website and look for the information there. I have seen and heard questions asked from people, general public, and sometimes the information given is not exactly accurate. And there's a very common reason for that, a very easy explanation, which is that the information is changing. And unless you're like obsessive like me, and you've documented all of this and you kept careful track of it, you may not necessarily be aware of where things are now, or what is currently occurring, right? So really go to the source when possible to get the exact current and correct information. Now, once this announcement is made, again, I suspect in June, this will be published right on the BAA homepage. You won't have to search. It's going to be right there for you to see. As time goes by, these announcements get archived, and there's a news section on the BAA website whereby they have all of these announcements going back several years. So I have a little archive I've kept for myself separate from the internet so that I can keep a log of all of these things. You don't have to do that, but the only point of that is to say that this information is available, and you can even go back 5 years to find this information on the BAA website. In terms of the announcement, also to note, if you follow the Boston Marathon or the BAA on their social channels, they will publish that this statement has been released. So you're not gonna not know that it's happening unless you decide to live under a rock for the next 6 to 8 weeks, right? Do follow them on social. That means Instagram, Facebook, X, Twitter, whatever we call it these days, because that's going to be the way to know what is happening and get that information as soon as it is released. So I have here, this is this statement. This is, I'm sorry, a screenshot from part of the statement that came out in 2023, so last year. And I am going to just highlight a couple of things here so you know what exactly are we looking for? Why is this statement important? Well, the dates. That's one of the most important things. When does registration open? It always opens, or it has always opened on Monday at 10 a.m. Eastern. When does it close? In recent past, it has always closed on a Friday, 5 days after opening at 5 p.m. Eastern. Again, all of these things are based on Eastern time because Boston is in the Eastern time zone. So, as it states here, this process has changed, but for the last 3 years running, it has been the same in that it has occurred over a 5-day span. As I mentioned, early-ish or on the early or middle of September. So again, this is exactly what I expect to happen for this year, 2024, which would apply to the 2025 race. But we do not have any official confirmation of any of this until the BAA releases this statement and telling us for sure. Want to note here, because I know this question comes up a lot, your Boston qualifying time is based on your age on race day, and the Boston Marathon always occurs on Patriots Day, which is the third Monday in April. Always, that is when it occurs. So for 2025, that will be on April 21st. So if you have a birthday in April, this is super important information to you because you may get an extra 5+ minutes depending upon when your birthday falls. So that's something you definitely want to check into. Here are the 2025 qualifying standards. Now, these standards are definitely what the standards are for 2025. The qualifying window for the 2025 race is already like 80% done. Okay, so these standards are what the standards will be for the next Boston Marathon registration period. So you can see here, age and gender breakdown. There's men's qualifying times and there's non-binary and women's qualifying times. Make sure you know what time you need to be applying with. Now, asterisks here. Everybody, almost everybody, I guess, myself included, believes that you're going to need to have run under these times to actually get a spot in the race in the year 2025. However, that said, you can apply as long as you have this time or 1 second, 1 second under even. And I do, for my part, I recommend people apply no matter what buffer they have. If it's only 1 minute, if it's 30 seconds, whatever the case may be, I really recommend you put your name in the hat. Why? because it's free. And frankly, it's only going to take you 10 to 15 minutes max, right? So there's no harm in that. It don't count yourself out before you've officially been counted out. That's my take on that. I know some people are like, well, I don't want to bother, blah, blah, blah. It's 10 minutes. Just bother. If that's a bother, I don't know. Okay, let's move on. So here is, as I mentioned, some of the history into how the registration and application process has changed. So I'm just going to go through this again. I think it's interesting. If you don't, sorry. In 2011, that is when things took an abrupt change. The race reached capacity in a record 8 hours and 3 minutes. And there was a lot of kerfuffle in that year as well. So people were unhappy. And the BAA was like, whoa, we got to make some changes because we don't want to do it like that again. So the very next registration period, that was September 2012, that is when the BAA instituted several different things, and the evolution is really what led us to where we are today. But in 2012, they tightened the standards. That was the first time they have done that. They had done that since 1980. So huge, standards have been the same for a very long time, and that was a watershed moment there. The standards changed. The other thing that happened is they brought about a 2-week rolling registration, and this is the process that is gone as of the most recent date, and I don't suspect it's going to come back. But the way it used to happen is those with the faster times, or the faster, the higher the buffer, they were allowed to apply first. And the registration took place over a 2-week period. That has been gone. And so it's now 5-day period, but this was instituted in 2012. The other thing that they did is they brought about this 10-year streak application, which is still in place. And it's a program I'm going to talk about more later on, but this was created in 2012. So you run 10 in a row, you have a separate registration and a separate way to get in. So the other thing that occurred in 2012, after all of these changes that the AA made, several significant changes, the race did not sell out within that 2-week period. So registration just stayed open, and people could continue to enter until the field was completely filled. And that did not occur until mid-October. So essentially, 3 to 4 weeks of full registration in 2012 after all these changes were made. However, by the following year, by 2013, a cut came back and the field was filled completely with extras that were not allowed entry. So that was all very short-lived. In 2019, there were new standards put into place, and the qualifying times were tightened by 5 minutes across the board. So that's pretty recent. Most of us who are running and out there qualifying remember this. We lived through it. But in terms of when or if the qualifying times will be tightened, when it happened most recently, it was announced with the cutoff announcement at the close of registration in September of 2019. So again, I expect if that were to happen for, say, Boston Marathon 2026, that is when that would be done. certainly not in the middle or at the end of the qualifying period. That makes no sense. Another thing that has occurred within recent past, in September 12th of 2022, the BAA established this non-binary division and the non-binary qualifying times. I will just say that the BAA has stated when they released this program and the category, and they have stated since that these times will be subject to review and will be likely changing. So I do not know when or what those changes will be. However, that is something that they have stated they are looking to review and fine tune. In September of 2023, that was just this past year, there were a record number of applicants, huge, blowing things out of the water number of applicants. I'm going to go through the numbers and you're going to see, but that is a thing that occurred just this last year. Okay, field size. Now we're going to talk about the field. So there are a couple of things to know about the field. One is there's the number of total people that run the Boston Marathon. Then there is the field that are time qualifiers, right? And time qualifiers do not make up the entire field for the Boston Marathon. A lot of times people think that, but it's not correct. And in fact, the time qualifier field has been shrinking, as you can see from these numbers here on my chart. But the distribution that the BAA has stated, again, as general target, do not take, this is not like, gospel truth, but general target, they've stated they want a distribution of 80% time qualifiers and 20% charity bibs, sponsor bibs, and international tour operator bibs, etc. Right? So that is, again, broadly speaking, what the BAA has stated. Now, you can see I have here the number of time qualifier applicants that were accepted by year going back to 2014. Overall, since 2014, the number of time qualifier spots has decreased. There are some exceptions there, and I have these little asterisks for you to see. One exception, April 2020. The race did not occur. However, we had all registered for it, had done the entire process before that race was canceled. Before that race was canceled, the field was increased, and it was increased to 31,500. This was stated by the BAA and made public, again, before the race was canceled. So we know that had that race occurred, it would have been a field larger than 30,000, which has been the stated BAA target for several years now, like going back a decade or more, right? I obviously have no crystal ball. I do not know why the difference for that year, why it wasn't continued. But that was the only time in recent past that was allowed to occur. And you could see here when the total field was enlarged, they also enlarged the number of time qualifier applicants that were accepted. But again, that race didn't occur, and it's so lost in time. Another exception to the 30,000 of the total field would be that COVID race, which occurred in October of 2021. Obviously, everything that revolved around those COVID years and those COVID races, they are complete aberrations from all of the other years. So really, when I talk about things, or when I think about things in terms of trends, I just erase those from the record because they don't really inform to any trends. But the field size for that race, again, total field size stated was projected to be 20,000. So again, just a total different number. But overall, you can see how things have changed. So for 2023, just pointing out here, the field size was down to 22,000, which is the lowest that has ever been in recent past, excluding the COVID year, which obviously is a weird year. I do not know what the fields for the time qualifiers will be for 2025's race, which will apply this year. However, again, trends are not lending towards any growth on that front. Okay, the cut. I'm going to get into the cut. And when I talk about the cut, what I deal with is what has occurred before. I don't know the future. I can't tell you the future with any amount of certainty. I can speculate until the cows come home, and we all can. But I'm just really going to talk about what has happened before so we have some frame of reference. And I think that also informs us for the future. But how does the cut work? What does the cut mean, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Essentially, there's a number of applicants. There's a number of spots. That's the field for time qualifiers, not the total field, the field for time qualifiers. You subtract those, and that's how you get the cut. So the more applicants or the fewer spots, or as what occurred for registration 2023 last year, huge number of applicants, small number of spots, big cut. That's what happens, right? So you can see here, this is charting out the number of applicants. COVID years aside, we were on a trend of the applicant numbers increasing year over year over year over year. You can see those numbers were increasing until there was a sea change, excluding COVID. A sea change occurred in September of 2019 when the standards were changed by 5 minutes. Why did the BAA change the standards? Because they felt that the applicant pool was growing and ballooning to be too large, right? In comparison to what the field for time qualifiers was at that time, right? So you can see what happened. They changed the standards. The following year, they had 3,000 fewer apply. I don't know what the BAA is going to do. I do not have a crystal ball, and I do not work for the BAA. But you can see here, we had 33,000 people apply in September of 2023. I cannot imagine that the BAA wants to have a continually ballooning number of applicants because there's just not spots available for them. And their mechanism for dealing with that is changing the standards. So the cut is determined by, again, how many people they cannot fit and also what those times submitted were, right? So people have done modeling and have done predictions, right? There's only so much guessing that you can do. It is essentially guessing, right? Because we do not know what times people are applying with. Certainly, it could be there's a huge pool applying with BQ minus 30 and a huge pool of people applying with BQ minus 5, right? And a gully in the middle. We don't know. But when you read stories or people that are making estimations, they are usually predicting an even distribution throughout, right? And obviously, that doesn't always necessarily occur in reality. So, in terms of what the cut will be as a number, as a time, again, completely guessing. However, the higher the number that is cut, the more people that are cut, the higher the cutoff, overall speaking. A lot of times people will say, bring up really weird, I don't understand why anybody brings this up, but the cut for the race that occurred in April, this is the COVID edition, sorry, the the registration occurred in April for the October race. This is all within 2021. People bring this up. The cut was 7 minutes 47 seconds. It was a very weird year. Like, I don't you like what happened this last year where we had the cut of 5 minutes 29. That is more indicative of certain trends, I would say. Not taking that 7 minutes 47 seconds, because again, we were in the depths of a global pandemic. Um, there were several countries and nations that were not even allowed to travel to the United States had they wanted to. There were marathons that were not occurring across the globe. And so in any case, it was a very, very weird year, and only 14,000 time qualifiers were accepted that year. So again, what I do personally, it's there. I know it happened, but I just delete it from the record as far as my as far as the informing on what will probably most likely come. The other thing I want to point out in terms of standards changing and when it has happened in the past. So you can see here, the cut, this is the cut that was brought about by the excess number of applicants for the 2019 race, which was we applied for in September of 2018. That was a 4-minute 52-second cut. So for the following year, the BAA said, we're going to change the standards by 5 minutes. So essentially, in essence, what they did is they only made a real change of 8 seconds, right? Because nobody was getting in if they didn't have almost 5 minutes under anyway. Again, I really think this leads to a change of the standards based on what has occurred, because in September of 2023, for this race that just occurred last month, you needed to have run 5 minutes 29 seconds under your qualifying time to gain entry to the race. It's not a big leap to think that probably or possibly the BAA is going to want to make an adjustment going forward. Again, don't know when, don't know how, don't know by how much, but we do have the past to tell us what has gone on. And I will note as well, you can see here from the numbers, year over year over year, it was the cutoff in terms of time was increasing. It was increasing, right? So it's not that like the BAA is sort of just going along with what is already naturally occurring. I think this year, depending upon what the cut ends up being, I think this year is going to be a real watershed informative type of year in terms of where things are going. Is that 5 minutes 29? Is that an outlier, or is that just a hint of what we are looking for towards for the next however many 5-10 years, right? One thing I'm just pointing out these numbers because I know it's come up and people say things. Um, the non-binary category has not existed for that long. There's two races where it has existed, right? And you can see the numbers here. So one thing I just want to point out, this is the number that were accepted as time qualifiers. You will see in the finisher stats, there are additional non-binary runners that finished the race. However, those were not those people, those extra, you'll see if you look at the finisher stats, were not admitted as time qualifiers, right? So whenever we're talking about the cut, we're really only worried about time qualifiers and not those other categories, right? So for the very first time they had the non-binary category, they admitted 22 runners. The following year, they had a non-binary category. They admitted 44 runners. It's a very small number, folks. Teeny tiny, very small number. I bring up here as a counterpoint how a different category of runners, these streak runners, these 10-year streak runners. Now, I will say I am working on a streak. So I like full disclosure, I'm all in favor of this program because I want to use it myself. I'm on number 6 in a row and I plan to get to 10, come hell or high water. However, I will note that this number is growing by quite a bit year over year. And it shows I don't think there's any signs of it slowing down, frankly. The first year that it was implemented was 2012. I do not have stats for every single year. You can see here 2021 and 2022. The BAA did not release that information, so I don't know. But for the year 2018, there were 424. And then that number has since increased to the most recent, which is 660. Again, I don't think these are huge numbers. Like, I don't think anybody should be like, oh my God, I can't believe that they're ruining the race, whatever nonsense people say. But just as a comparison, it's a bigger pool by exponential numbers, right? And again, I'm working on this program myself, so I hope it sticks around. But how does this 10 or more work? You get to register early, which is cool. You have to have done 10 races in a row. It has to be consecutive. You can't have any skips. So it's hard, right? This is not an easy thing. Like, nobody's going out, and just like half-assing this goal. You have to really focus on it, right? But what does it grant you? It means that as long as you run the time for your age and gender, you get a spot, guaranteed. You are not subject to a cut. So if the cut continues to go up and up and up and the BAA doesn't adjust the standards, as a streaker, no big deal, doesn't matter, right? You can run 1 second under the time. You can run the time exactly if you could. I mean, that seems risky to me, but you could run the time exactly and you are in the Boston Marathon, period. What is the time? What is it you're shooting for? Say it's 3:30 for your age and gender. If you run a 3:29, 3:29:59, you're in the Boston Marathon and you get to register early before the other applicants. So your spot is guaranteed. As I said, this number is already over 600 and growing. Where it's going to grow to, I don't know. Will there be a point where the BAA says, wait a minute, this is too many? I don't know. It seems conceivable, but what is that threshold? Again, I don't know. That is my 2 cents. Those are some numbers for you. I hope you like numbers as much as I do in charts because I had a lot in there. Um, I did not, hopefully, I think I didn't speculate too much on what the cut will be because I don't know and nobody knows. And if they say they know, they're lying. We'll have to wait and see. If you have questions, feel free to send me an email. If you want to just type some comments to me, you're happy, I'm happy to reply to them on the YouTube channel. I will be applying for what will be my 7th Boston Marathon this year. I'm going for the streak, like I said, and I hope everybody who wants to get in does get in. Of course, I kind of don't think that that's gonna happen that way, but I want everybody to apply who has the time. That is my wish for the world. And yeah, good luck to all of us. Bye.